Welcome back to another New Year edition of the SportsPro podcast. I'm your host, Elena Kouyoufa, and today I am delighted to be joined by Rani, who is General Counsel and Board Member of LiveScore Group. This is an episode I believe will resonate with many women, as the conversation did with me, as we dive into the challenges of securing a job, frequent pitfalls we face, and how to overcome them. The good news is that we are not on our own, and companies like LiveScore Group are taking a strategic approach to diversifying their recruitment and company policies. I truly believe this episode will spark some motivation for those looking for a new role and for persons in decision-making positions to create change by taking some of these things on board. Let's hop right in and hear from Rani. Hi, Rani. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited to dive into this conversation today, as we'll be discussing the importance of female representation in the sports industry and some practical advice which individuals and companies can also take on board to drive change. Before we get started, I think it'd be great for our listeners if you gave a bit of background to who you are and the work you do within LiveScore Group.
Hi, Elena. I'm the General Counsel at LiveScore. I've been a lawyer for the last 13 years now and always worked within media law, really, as a specialization. And then sort of mid-career so far, I moved over to London and began to kind of more focus my career towards a sports law direction. And for the last 6 years, I've worked exclusively in sports at LiveScore Group. We are a international sports media and online sports betting operation. Our media product is a global sports product, data, stats, news, content, and that's accessed by millions and millions of users across the world every day. And then accompanying our sports media product, we have sports betting products as well. We're live in 4 jurisdictions, 2 different brands, and a lot of growth to come. Within that context, at LiveScore, I head up our legal department. We've got a reasonably big in-house team, actually. We're around 15, 16 in my team. Not everyone's a lawyer, but a lot of people working in the legal and compliance space and data protection as well. We're a full service team, so every different type of legal issue that comes up across commercial contracts, sponsorships, regulations, marketing compliance, all different types of matters within the legal framework across the world. And an amazing, talented, fantastic bunch of people that I work with. So very lucky. I'm also an executive board member at LiveScore Group. We are an international group, but my part of the business is London and in England.
As I think LiveScore Group does present itself as a whole ecosystem, in terms of hiring practices, sports business is an industry that's quite male dominated. And then thinking of the legal aspect on top of that, again, that adds an extra layer of male dominance in there as well. So I'd be keen, first of all, to hear your perspective, how it's been as a woman, like getting into this industry, like how has it been for you? But also after being in LiveScore Group, have there been any strategies you've been sort of pivotal in implementing there?
On the first part, in terms of my own perspective, within our kind of micro legal team, which is only obviously 15 people out of 800 at LiveScore Group, so it's a very small percentage of the business overall, we actually have great gender diversity. And there's a lot of women in my team and incredibly talented lawyers and compliance people. So as a micro example, I'm actually in a very gender positive team. But overall, the business as a whole doesn't represent that same diversity, and we can get onto that in a little while. In terms of my own experience, again, I think it's been a lot of luck, actually, and also a lot of determination. I know women tend to dismiss their own achievements sometimes and perhaps not reflect on them in such a positive way. So maybe by saying luck, I've just done that myself, but I was determined to work in sports law. I did my master's in it and I was going to make it happen some way or another. But then the way it unfolded was just a series of lucky kind of things, jobs that just happened to come up, people that I happen to know, knocking on different doors and extending my network and ensuring that I was getting myself before the right people to have the right conversations. So I don't want to kind of diminish the path that I've taken, but also sometimes it's timing, isn't it? I think timing is important in everything in life in terms of relationships and career progression and all different sorts of things. But yeah, my own team isn't that representative of the wider LiveScore Group gender split. We have undertaken a lot of activations and initiatives and hard work to try and improve our gender balance at LiveScore Group over the last couple of years. And it's been a really concerted effort. That's something that hasn't been luck. In 2022, we started our internal women's group. So an employee resource group. I think they're relatively common, but not present in every workspace, where you have a group of kind of an underrepresented minority, and that group works as a collective to try and change things within the business from within and from the people that are actually there working in it day to day. I came back from maternity leave. It was just a massive change in all facets of my life. I was coming back with this new identity. I didn't quite know how to correlate my old identity and my new identity. And I guess I didn't want to forget who I was professionally or have anything about my professional life be reduced to my new status as a mother. And so I was kind of grappling with those feelings and wanting to bring women together in the business as well to see what we could do to make other women more comfortable and try and increase our women's numbers across the business as well. And from that starting point, which was September 2022, we have done so much as a business. So that group, together with our people team, reviewed all of our internal policies from a gender diversity perspective, and we tried to either build on them, increase the benefits, add new policies, all different things that we thought would attract more women to our business or make our business a better place for women in general. We also gender neutralized all of our recruitment processes. We changed the way that we speak to the market so that we could attract more women. We changed our actual internal recruitment processes as well. So we have women on nearly every interview panel now. We don't pay any attention to career gaps in CVs because we know that they're often related to caring responsibilities. We look at CVs where perhaps, not every box is ticked, but there are interesting things. We look at people outside of industry. So we've really changed our processes internally. We also standardized all of our scoring across interview process and recruitment process as well. And apart from all of that, we also have a fantastic internal PR team who have made sure that we are shouting about the things that we're doing and that we're making it publicly known, the kinds of ways that we're improving our business for women and often by women for women, but also with the buy-in of the full executive. By shouting about it, you get the attention of the marketplace, and we've seen real tangible results in our recruitment. So super long answer, but basically in 2022, we had 22% women across the board. And now today, 2024, we've got 29%. So it's about a 33% increase, I think.
Yeah, amazing. No, and I think it's very much needed, and it's great information, the work LiveScore Group has done, but also in such a short period of time, because these are quite a few and hefty changes you guys have implemented. So I think it's really, really important that they are spoken about, and women can say, I can go for this role, because I think it's talked about a lot. There's a lot of stats that show that women always contemplate whether they can apply for a role, and oftentimes they don't even apply for one because they think they don't have the criteria to even get an interview for it, whilst the same stats don't really apply for men. So obviously like speaking about these things and making it really transparent, like what someone's hiring process is like and how their applications are reviewed, I think is a great. So obviously well done for that. And it's like the most important thing is speaking up about it. As you said, like internally, these discussions must be had because sometimes we have to speak up about the struggles we face, as you said, like the identity of coming back to work, being a mother and so on. And obviously, as you said, people go through other things as well, like caregiving and aging parents and so on. So there's a lot of things. And you mentioned some practices that you've taken, but is there one specific or a couple of like practices in hiring that you consider are quite outdated right now and that companies and organizations should actually just get them out of the way and they shouldn't be there anymore?
It's a long time since I've gone for a job myself. So, I got this job 6 years ago. So it's hard to be critical because I don't really know what's happening in the marketplace. Maybe everyone else is keeping up with us, but I feel like it wouldn't be such a conversation if they were. So I'm going to assume that we're doing things slightly better than potentially others, especially in industry. I think one thing that's not so much a bad practice, but certainly I experienced it when I've previously been looking for jobs, and we have made a very conscious effort of ensuring we don't do it, is being like opaque on your policies. Women want to know, often young women want to know what the future looks like for them in any kind of recruitment. And men too, and so they should. And so we, with our recruitment and within our job specs, we publish our policies. So you can read our family policy before you go for a job. You can read our fertility policy, our period policy, our caregiving policy, our pregnancy loss policy. You can understand what we are like as a business truly before you consider taking a role within the organization. And I think that that's critical because when you're nervous and going for jobs and speaking to hiring managers and speaking to talent teams, you probably don't want to ask some of the tricky questions which you think may reflect poorly on you. And you know what? Asking to see a family policy shouldn't reflect poorly on you, but I'm sure in some different organizations it's maybe seen as detrimental still, which is outrageous, of course, but that's where we are. So by making those kind of processes less opaque and transparent, as you mentioned, then I think you're going to attract more candidates. And you just want the best candidates you can get into your funnel, right? I don't care who we hire, green, blue, Martian, man, woman, whatever. As long as they're the exact right person for the role. And you only know if you've got the right person for the role if you've seen a range of candidates that are not homogenous, that have thought diversity, and that can potentially bring something fresh to your organization. It's for the good of gender diversity and the good of women, but it's not totally altruistic, right? I want awesome people in my company, and I'm only going to get awesome people if I'm getting to see a range of people who might not ordinarily have applied.
Exactly. Being able to pick the right person for a company has a whole load of benefits for an entire organization, not just the women you've picked. I think it also allows someone to tap into the culture of an organization long term when someone wants a career in a specific industry or in a specific organization. I think the culture that each company applies to their employees is like one of the most important things, and down the line tap into employee satisfaction and other things that showcase the success of an organization. I
think your network and your reach of the women who are already in the company is also so critical, because women tend to have a higher concentration of women in their networks. So then you need to get your women to be speaking about how great the company is. If it is great. If it's not great, obviously, I don't want them to speak about it. There's loads you can do on that as well. We've hosted women in product evenings, women in programmatic evenings at LiveScore Group, because we've got some fantastic women within those departments within our business. So we're broadening our network all the time. We've got integrations between our people platform and our LinkedIn site so that we can proliferate our job specs to our, women within our network as well. So I think it's like word of mouth. And once you start to build a culture and you've got positive engagement internally, then you're going to externalize that as best you can.
Yeah, no, definitely building a network is a huge thing. To give some practical advice for like listeners in terms of, you know, when they apply for such roles? Like, it's great companies have that, they've ticked all the boxes, but what happens on the other side when you apply? How can candidates actually emphasize and showcase, you know, these diverse skill sets that might not necessarily be the ones they think will get them the job, but can actually show transferable skills, can show that they can actually get that role, and oftentimes like help them overcome any potential pitfalls? What would your advice be in terms of someone applying to roles?
Yeah, it's a good question, because you're not going to hire someone that not only doesn't have experience within the industry, but also doesn't show an interest. That's the big thing for me. You can come to a job interview without any industry experience, without any sports experience, but you better have researched my products, right? You better know about LiveScore Group. You better know what we do, who we are. And so I think it's really preparation, and that's totally neutral advice that can be applied to absolutely anyone going for any role. Practice till you feel confident going into any kind of recruitment situation. So if you're bringing different skills, of course, you need to be able to speak about them, but you need to speak about how you can make them relevant. It's not the interviewer's job to put together 2 and 2. You need to sell yourself, which I know sometimes is difficult, and particularly women tend to be. I know this both anecdotally, but it's also widely reported that women tend to be, you know, that less confident in talking about their achievements and what they can bring to the table. But it's critical. You know, if you want a job and you got your heart set on it, then you need to stand up and kind of ensure that you're selling yourself. So yeah, it's a hard one, because I would always encourage any kind of unique or varied background and skill set to apply for a role if they're passionate about it, interested about it, and think they can do it. But then it's your job to prove that you actually can. And, you know, do the homework, study the receipts, because I will know the minute that someone hasn't prepared well for an interview. And I think that's always the downfall, as opposed to a lack of a particular academics or a particular role on their CV.
Sorry to interrupt your podcast. Just wanted to let you know that new ERA applications for the class of 2024-2025 are officially open. We are on a mission to bring a group of women or non-binary sports executives to the forefront and elevate their profiles. Sound interesting? Then do check out our website for more and share with your network. Let's get back to the pod. You mentioned there have been hires lately from varied backgrounds. Have there been any success stories you can share?
We've had quite a few really great success stories. I think one in particular that is worth shouting about is our director of product within the product research area. This was someone that came from a fashion retail background, had never worked in sports, never worked in gambling, completely new industry, but obviously did a lot of homework before she applied. And genuinely, I think it's pretty much universally accepted among our senior team. She's one of the best hires we've ever made. And she's done such an incredible job building her knowledge within the space and earning the respect of everyone around her. And it's just one of those stories about it's time to break the old boys network, for want of a different phrase. We don't have to hire everyone that we used to work with, that our mates know, you know, we've got the CVs sent through the back door. We need to be fresh. We need to make sure that we're doing things in a slightly different way and, you know, really looking beyond the space. So she's a success story, and she's certainly someone that I always keep in my mind when we're having these kinds of conversations, because it's more than possible.
That's a real interesting story. So well done to her. What's your take on why should women actually apply for jobs that they don't actually think they've got the specifications for? This is a great example of someone who ordinarily would not have the specifications for. So yeah, why should women actually, take that plunge and go for it?
I think it depends what you want to do with your career and what's important to you. It's hard to figure out what your passion is, right? And not everyone is lucky enough to realize what they might be really passionate about. And so I do feel lucky in that respect, in that I was always sport obsessed from day dot. And I just knew it was in my future, and I knew it would be where my career was. So I kind of molded my aspirations and growth around that goal. Whereas for others, it might not be as clear cut. And that's why I think having a diverse range of experiences is always a good thing as well. So if it's your passion, then obviously keep going until you get it. But if it's not necessarily your passion, but you think it would be, it's good for your growth, or you can do it, you can 100% do it, and you want to get exposure to a different industry, I just encourage people to take stock and reflect on what's important to them and go for it. Obviously, you can't just apply a scattergun approach, though. You know, it's not, this podcast said to go for every single job, so I might as well throw my hat in the ring. You know, it has to be researched and with intention and for your own benefit and something that you're actually interested in, keen on. But yeah, I think apart from just like really encouraging people to dive in head first if they think they can do it, I don't know how much more specific advice I've got.
No, that's great. And I think another thing we can touch upon is like differences you've seen in CVs of like men versus women. Has there been anything that stands out to you that, you know, this is something that typically we don't see in women applying? Is there something you've noticed?
That's a really interesting question. I'm not sure I've seen like really stark differences or like something that I would say, oh, that's an inherently women way of doing things or male way of doing things. But I think career breaks, I mean, there are definitely some, let's say, more backwards organizations that might dismiss career breaks or not really reflect on them. So putting a little note in about your career break and maybe what you were doing, and if you happen to continue your personal development by taking some courses or doing whatever it might have been during, if it was mat leave or any other caring break or career break, it's a good little note to add to CVs. I mean, men can do that too, because obviously men are taking more extended paternity leaves and other leaves as well. And then I just would say don't be too verbose, you know, try and keep it punchy, to the point. No one likes a 5-page CV. And I also think if you can't keep it to a couple of pages, then you're not good at selling yourself. You're not good at summarizing and clarifying in like a really clear and straightforward way. So being able to write like a nice, short, punchy, look at how great I am in that kind of way, then you're probably saying too much and you're being too flowery with your language and you're trying to explain yourself too much. So yeah, maybe men are a bit better at like short, sharp, check it out.
Perfect. Definitely something to keep note of. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, your workforce kind of sits at that 29% mark right now with women. Based on like the things we've touched on and the policies and strategies you have implemented, what does sort of a better gender balance look like for LiveScore Group in the future?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I have been asked this before. And I'm striving towards thought diversity, different voices in every room, different experiences and backgrounds in every room. We know that companies are more successful when they've got different brains together towards one strategic goal. And it's not about getting 50-50 parity, but as I mentioned earlier, it's about getting the best people into the roles. And you're only going to be comfortable in knowing that you have the best people where you've had a wide candidate selection process. And so I think 33% increase in 2 years is like definitely, I'm super proud of that and where we've got to. It's not the only change. We've also seen about a 20% increase in the number of women just looking at our recruitment sites. So we've gone up to like a 60-40 split in terms of women coming to Glassdoor, LiveScore's Glassdoor page or our Indeed pages, and just like attracting women's eyes onto the company. And then we just got internal metrics as well in terms of happiness scores and how people think that we're doing on diversity internally. And that's just as important to us as an organization, because we want to be walking the walk as well as talking the talk. You can't sort of go out to the market and say that you're doing X, Y, and Z and then not live and breathe that internally. So for me, success is multifaceted, and it's also going to come out in kind of all different minor ways, as well as kind of an overarching, yeah, we've got more women in the business, you know, percentage split. So it's all those little things where you're chipping away all the time. And certainly where I want us to be in 5 years is more women on our C-suite. I'd love to see more women CEOs in the business generally, across the industry. I would love to see more women coaching elite sports across men's and women's organizations. I just would like to see more women in every room, pitch, trackside, and everywhere else. So that's where my head's at.
Yeah, I think that's the goal. And we can see there's already change watching documentaries over sort of on Netflix over the weekend, and quite a few there around women's sport. There was the Matildas and Simone Biles. Like, these are things you wouldn't potentially see in the past. So there's a lot of work going there, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And as you said, like, that 33% increase is not just because of what's being done in the wider industry. It is because of policies you have implemented in such a short time frame. And, it's testament to the work you've done, that number. As you said, like, if that goal of yours to get that sort of gender parity in there and that diversity, do you think priority right now is kind of tapping into these strategies and like making sure those are all working well? Or are there also other policies and strategies that you are working in the background? Obviously, you don't need to share these right now, but are there more things being done in the background, or is it just making sure we get these right first?
Yeah, just something you said there, actually, I want to just go back to around the documentaries and like more women's sport kind of at the forefront. I think it's not just women's sport necessarily, but it's also the role that women play in sport. I just came to this podcast like so angry, actually, because I just read an article on the Sydney Morning Herald this morning. I am in London, but after 10 years, I still read the Sydney papers. And one of the stories was about a player in the New South Wales Rugby League team who had missed the birth of his first child because he was in a training camp, and like what a great sacrifice it was, and what a great man he was to do this, And actually it's just made me so annoyed, because that shouldn't be what we value in sport. Actually, I think it's incredibly detrimental potentially to not only that child, but also can't imagine not having my birth partner if I was in a happy partnership at a birth. And what sacrifice has the woman in that situation had to make? And so I think it's just the discourse around men and sport and, gender issues more generally that I would also love to see change and continue to improve and have metamorphose over the next however long it takes to get the right kind of attention on these topics. But to go to your actual question in respect of things that LiveScore Group are doing, more things that we're doing, I think, look, we've done loads, and I think we are definitely not resting on our laurels. But now it's about embedding. So it's like you can write the policies and you can put the PR statements out and all the rest of it, but then it's having to do the stuff and ensuring that actually day to day, the way you're operating and the way your culture is embedding is ensuring that those things are pushed to the fore and that they become kind of a natural part of your organization, not just a piece of paper in the drawer. And so, we have seen a massive uptake in our uplifted paternity policy recently. So, there's a lot of men taking advantage of these great kind of family-centric ways of working that we're trying to implement as well. Indeed, our fertility policy is also gender neutral because we know men and women go through fertility issues and clinic visits, etc. So the uptake of our fertility policy has also been quite popular across both men and women. So it's about embedding these different types of ways of working and ensuring that everyone in our company knows what's important to us. We've got a super diverse, culturally diverse company. We are across Europe and Africa. We're in multiple locations. And when you've got also different cultures as well as different ways of working and kind of different priorities in the business, you really got to establish what you stand for, what your values are, what your mission is in the industry and in corporate strategy in general, and then adhere to it. So, yeah, we've got some other things on our plates for sure. In terms of internally, our women's group continues to do amazing stuff month to month in terms of education, internal mentoring, internal networking, policy review, gender pay gap analysis. But really, it's about making sure that that culture is widespread across our business.
Yeah, and it's great to hear that there's a lot of work being done internally as well, because I think we've seen a lot of times, or at least it's maybe what we see, because I can't judge what people do internally if I'm not there, but there's a lot of women-centered campaigns, and sometimes you don't know if these are kind of more tick box exercises or if there is all this work being done behind the scenes. So I think, as you said, for organizations, like, do talk about them, make them transparent, because it does do good. And I think it's not only for the people applying for your job, but I think it's great for the wider industry to see that these policies exist and how they can adapt them or, even initiate their own ones. So yeah, I think I'd like to hear your take on kind of these more women-focused campaigns. Are they successful in promoting diversity? What more can be done? Is it still the right way to be doing things? Stuff around International Women's Day, like people decide to do campaigns there.
Oh God. How long have you got?
Because, oftentimes, you see people just focus on these kind of campaigns. Fine, do them, but what's being done in the background?
The corporate cupcakes. Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts about International Women's Day. I mean, it is a corporate PR machine, right? It is a company. International Women's Day is literally like a registered trademark. It's a company that makes a lot of money, from what I understand, from this kind of global movement. It has its own theme, which isn't the same as the UN Women's. So I have a lot of thoughts about it. It's a bit of a dichotomy, because I think, like, I don't want there to be no conversation. So if this is a springboard starting point for some businesses to have conversations, around these big days, International Women's Day or whatever else it might be, a Lionesses final, or whatever, else is kind of the topic of conversation at a particular time. I don't think that's a bad thing. However, you obviously can't be a one-trick pony and you pull out the cupcakes on the 8th of March, but you don't do anything that's good for women every other day, 365 other days of the year, 364 days of the year. So that certainly isn't the way to do it. We have done International Women's Day panels in the part. We had a panel last year from memory. We have done activations and kind of in-office celebrations, but I don't want to make it a focus of the calendar. And likewise with other, weeks or days that might be dedicated to women's issues or women's causes, because this is an everyday conversation. And it's something that I'm not just willing to kind of accept that you've got the lip service at a particular time of the year and then everything falls off a cliff and you never hear about it again until, 7th of March the following year in preparation for the next day. So, yeah, I do feel quite strongly about International Women's Day. I do think the work that it's done to actually get some of these conversations started in the last decade has been amazing. But I feel like we've almost outgrown it as a society, particularly Western society. I mean, that's all I can really speak to is my experience within the London community and probably, potentially Australia as well. So, yeah, I think it's been an amazing kind of kickstart to a lot of these conversations and making big corporations think slightly differently and maybe adopt different policies and get different conversations happening. But of course, it can't just end there from a diversity perspective. So I'd like to say it's seen its day, but I'm very aware of my privileged bias in terms of the city community within which I sit. And I'm sure that there are a lot of other communities around the world where, International Women's Day is not even a topic of conversation, let alone, something that we might now consider stale. So I just want to qualify that answer by sort of my perspective, I guess.
Yeah, no, those are all very valid and interesting points. Obviously, LiveScore Group, as you said, is an ecosystem with different strands, and one of them is that sort of betting and gaming strand to it as well. This is obviously quite a new industry for women. I mean, it's always been around, but, women actively partaking in this kind of activity, but also working in that field is quite new, I would say, and not the traditional area that you'd imagine a woman working in. What kind of campaigns and activations have been done? I know there have been some things around Virgin's Bets, campaigns to promote diversity and get more people in this space. So what is kind of the right and tactful way to do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I have actually seen quite a lot of change in 6 years. When I joined LiveScore Group 6 years ago, my very first conference that I went to, there was essentially pole dancing display and, women in skimpy outfits serving drinks. And that was essentially the only purpose they thought women could fulfill within the industry. And there's a lot of old school personalities, shall we say, within the industry. That has massively been changing, and you've seen like a wave of fresh perspectives coming in. I'm so proud of LiveScore Group because my executive team and all of the people I work with, bearing in mind 71% of them are men, are just amazing in the way that they kind of tackle sexism and misogynistic behavior within the industry, full stop. So it has massively changed. I still think it can be a bit of a daunting place for a woman. You see incredibly undiverse panels every conference you go to, off quite often as 5 white middle-aged men on stage and no one else. And that's simply because, they could always do better, but I think a lot of the time it's simply because that is the primary employee pool to choose from. So we've got a way to go, but we have come a long way as well. So I don't want to be too negative. In terms of what we're doing, Virgin Bet did an amazing activation in, I think it was February, where we rebranded a traditional ladies' day at Ayr Racecourse as Women's Day. So not only Women's Day obviously makes it more inclusive in terms of the whole community of people who are women and identify as women, but also it just modernizes it. And we had women performers. We donated a lot of proceeds to charity. We were choosing kind of best turned out among the different trainers and jockeys and stuff throughout the day. And I know that's something that, it's a low income industry for a lot of these people that work in horse racing. And so it was quite a special way of kind of giving back to the grassroots community around the race course. And we also partnered, and we've continued this partnership with an app called Walk Safe. And it's about getting women to and from venues safely, ensuring that I think they can ping their network about when they're leaving and arriving home. We can get into a whole debate as to why that kind of product should ever be needed, but that is a different conversation. And the facts are that it is often needed, and women are, the predominant victims of attacks globally. So, unfortunately, the sad case is those kind of safety measures are still needed. And we've partnered with Walk Safe to ensure people were getting home safely from the race day, etc. So, yeah, I think we'll definitely see more kind of activations in this space. And Virgin Bet's whole brand ethos and philosophy is a good bet. And it's about being a good person, a good corporate citizen. And we're going to continue to do things that are good for our community, for our players, for the industries with which we work closely. And horse racing is one of those.
Amazing. Sounds like a really good sort of activation initiatives tied in there.
I think it was just a really fun day as well.
Yeah, that's the best part of it all, like making sure you tick all these things and it's fun as well. I think before we kind of wrap up, this has been really insightful. I'm sure a lot of listeners will appreciate all this advice you've shared. But you mentioned earlier you want to see a lot more sort of badass women in the industry. If you had to share your last piece of advice to organizations or to women, what would that be?
Oh, gosh. I definitely want to see more badass women in the industry. I really think organizations need to look intrinsically and make sure they're fostering the right culture, processes, policies, environment that really works towards gender balance, and not just gender diversity, but diversity full stop. I'm obviously speaking entirely during this segment about women's issues, but we've got LiveScore United, which is a race equality group. We've got our LGBTQI plus group, which is called Iridian. We've got a parents and carers group as well. So we're really trying to ensure that people from different backgrounds or people who are going through different circumstances at LiveScore Group are being represented, talked about, and heard. And I think that that's incredibly important for every organization. But my last piece of advice otherwise is, I think really strengthen your network. I know we touched on it a couple of times, but like go to those conferences when you get an invite. You might be one of, a few women in the room, but you're there. And I personally am an extroverted introvert, right? So if I have to be confident and I have to speak on a stage or on a podcast or whatever, I will. But actually my preference is normally to shrink and like hide in the toilets if I'm uncomfortable, and forcing yourself to like go and have conversations, introduce yourself to people in industries in which you're interested, broadening your network, asking someone to be your mentor if you have that kind of relationship with them, and really pushing yourself, getting comfortable being uncomfortable will probably be the best recipe for career success, I think, individually.
Amazing. I think that's some great advice to wrap things up. So thank you so much, Rani. I think, all the information has been super insightful, and I'd definitely recommend for people to take on board, and hopefully they've been keeping notes throughout this episode. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. And people are welcome to find me as well on LinkedIn or wherever. And I'm more than happy to continue the conversation or have a chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Elena.